Richard Shepard, you've directed 12 episodes of the television series Girls, and this season, in its last season, you directed the American Bitch episode. When you got that script and you sort of knew you were directing that episode, what about it sort of excited you most or intrigued you most about that episode?
Well, I've been super lucky that Lena and Jenny and Judd have been giving me the sort of bottle episodes since almost the second season of the show. I did One Man's Trash, which was the Patrick Wilson episode, which was sort of the first time they did sort of a standalone two-character episode. Then last season I did the Allison Williams episode, Panic in Central Park. So I'd done a few of these sort of two-handers. So when Lena gave me the script to American Bitch, she was like, this is the last season, and I wrote this especially for you and I to do together, which is a really lovely thing. And what I knew what she was saying was, here's another situation where it's, you know, we have a great opportunity because it's just two characters, but there's also a lot of pressure on us because when you do a two-character piece on a normal TV show, you have nothing to cut to. You can't cut to the funny scene with Ray or the funny scene here. You have to just stay with the story. The A story is the only story. So that is both a challenge and also super fun. But it makes it an interesting thing. So you get the script and you read it, and the first thing you're thinking is, can I make this interesting for 30 minutes? And then from there, shaping it with Lena and Jenny into working with them because they're so collaborative in the best ways we can to make the show as visual and as emotional and as interesting as possible. And certainly with that script, the first time I read it, I was like, wow, this is if we do this right, there's going to be some conversation from it, which, that's, as a director, especially an episodic director, that's an amazing thing to feel.
You said that the challenge with sort of this just an A storyline is finding the interesting, like, how do I make that interesting for 30 minutes? What's a choice or a moment from that episode that you think was particularly made that episode interesting?
Well, I don't know if it's specifically a moment, but I think it was just the whole approach to how we did it. I mean, for me, I was like, listen, it's a two-hander, but I'm going to make it a three-hander by finding the most perfect apartment we can for this guy to live in, so that when we are in this apartment, every room will be a character. And then I worked with Matt Munn, our production designer, and we had paintings made for almost every view in each room so that I could do shots where I could be outside of the room and see the characters, but also see a painting of the room. And we did these things to sort of add a visual energy to the show in a way, because the show really doesn't leave the apartment till the very end. So that was one of the things that I sort of brought to the party. And then the ending was something that we worked on together, sort of alter from the original script. In the original script, the episode ends with the daughter of Matthew Rhys coming in. There's a short exchange, and she leaves, and that's the end of the episode. And I said, I think we need to have the daughter play the instrument and have Hannah have to sit there and listen to it, because I think the audience wants to deal with that things we have just seen and have a moment to think about it, and also to be wondering what Hannah's going through in that very torturous sort of situation where he's so loving towards his daughter after he's basically just pulled out his penis and sort of forced Hannah into a very uncomfortable situation. So I fought for that scene, which is, again, visualizing, taking the script from to another level. And thankfully, Lena's always open to ideas. Some of them she rejects and some of them she doesn't. And that one she sort of gravitated to. And it also led to the last shot of the show, which was not scripted either, in which I sort of wanted to see Hannah leaving the apartment and all these other women heading in. And there was a lot of discussion about that because it was slightly surreal and a little different energy from what Girls normally does. But I think Lena felt, and I felt, that after 6 seasons, we sort of earned the right to do that, and that its bigger statement was more interesting in a way and worth trying. So we filmed it, and when we filmed it, we were all really excited about it. But then in editing, Lena and Jenny and Judd cut it out. and so the episode didn't have it. And I had to sort of literally use my last begging card left on Girls after 6 seasons, and I begged them to keep it in and sort of take the risk. And obviously I'm so glad that they did, but I wasn't above groveling. I mean, I literally groveled. I called all of them and begged.
Have you heard from them like since the episode aired, like with oh yeah, that was a good call?
Yeah. Lena has been very nice about addressing the fact that it took some groveling to put it in. But yeah, you know, but that's one of the most amazing parts of this show as a director, because they've been, you know, there are some TV shows that the director's hand is very strong, but you almost don't notice it. And then there's shows in which if the script and the situation is right, you can really say something in a way visually and say something in a way story-wise. And Lena and Jenny have always been open to comments about the script, thoughts about the script, ways to make it more interesting, both storytelling-wise, visually, and emotionally. And this was definitely a case where, as a man, as an older man compared to Lena certainly, I was able to say, hey, listen, I'm not going to take Matthew's position in this, but because I disagree with ultimately what Chuck Palmer is about, but I certainly want his argument to be as valid as possible. And as a man, I can bring in that point of view pretty clearly. So there was discussion about their debate in a way, so that it was hopefully he had enough of a point to make you sort of soften to him a little bit. That if you softened him a little bit, that was his way in to coerce Hannah into his bedroom, which was his sort of ultimate plan to prove his point, to show his power. And all of that was about being in an environment in which you have showrunners who are so confident about their material that they're willing to have discussions about it. And as a director, I think if I had been given this episode as my first episode on the series, I would have been too nervous really to suggest too many things. But having been on it for 6 years, I felt comfortable enough to say, hey, maybe we can change this ending. Maybe we can do this. And you're still going to, you know, we'll still get the best show we can.
Yeah, like that's interesting, like to think through the sort of like when you're like a director of a TV episode, but it's part of a larger series as well, and then you sort of there's a creator of the series and sort of how those decisions and things get made. What like you talked about the issue and the sort of that you when you were making it, you were thinking through, or you were aware that there would be quite a response, perhaps. What has the response been from this episode of Girls, which dealing with sort of writing an article on someone who's been accused by women of abuse of power and things like that, and you know, trusting the victims but being fair to the accused and things like that. How has the response been?
Well, it's been pretty extraordinary. I mean, there was a lot of interest in this episode, both as a statement in a bigger sort of way that Lena wanted to make, but also what really, it is such a great piece of writing that she did, because she was able to make a show that explored a really interesting, important topic and still make it feel like an episode of Girls. It didn't, it could have easily just gone off the rails and become some sort of awful debate that no one wants to watch. But instead, she'd earned the trust of the audience, and she still kept it in. There's still funny things. There's still, you still believe that that's Hannah in there. And it's Hannah after 6 years of seeing her. This episode couldn't have happened 6 years ago for many reasons, both my ability as a director to be as honest as possible, because I now know the creators in a way that I didn't when I first started. And also Hannah's character in a way wouldn't have been in that situation 6 years ago. She would have acted differently. So it was a sort of perfect timing. And Lena wanted to say something, but she wanted to say something in the guise of the show. And so we all wanted to make sure that it still felt like a Girls episode, that it was, that it didn't feel completely out of the canon. And I think because she had done The Panic in Central Park, and we had done One Man's Trash, there had been precedent, and they had done sort of the Japan episode. They had gone out of the comfort zone of the city. There was a precedent for this sort of episode, And I just feel lucky that she had given me those other ones, Panic in Central Park and One Man's Trash, you know, so that we had a trust in a way for her to trust me. And, you know, she got to work as an actress that, you know, she was an actress on those days. She had the trust of that Jenny was there and that I was there so that she could focus on performance, because honestly, if they both weren't working at the highest caliber of their acting, that episode also would have been lame, you know? So Lena was able to focus on what was most important for, she had written the script, it was solid, and to Lena and Jenny's credit, and Eileen, the producer, we were able to have a full day of rehearsal, which is not an everyday thing in television. And we were able to work out a lot of the kinks and a lot of the things. So Lena kept her writer's hat on during the rehearsal so she could put her actor's hat on when we actually got to work.
Really like directing like a play with the rehearsal time and restricted to one sort of location and a sort of two-person sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, you know, you want to be moving the camera and doing these things, but when people are sitting and talking, there's only so much you can do, and you want to be keeping the energy up. So the energy of the episode had to come from the passion of the discussion and the tension between them. And that was why it was so critical in how we shot it, in the editing by Myra and Kirstine, the particular amount of energy we could get in this episode. But this all started because Lena had an incredibly great script. And I think sometimes people, you know, when they're talking about girls, there's always a lot of bigger discussions about Lena and the pros and cons of Lena. But never forget, she's an extraordinary writer. And that's where it all starts. And this was, you know, you're only as good as the script you're given as a director, you know, especially in television. You know, there's times you get a script and you're like, well, we're going to give it the old college try, but you know deep down that it's not going to be like a seminal piece of television. It'll be just a perfectly good one. And then there's times you're like, oh, if we don't screw this up, we could actually make something really good, you know, and that we've had that a few times on Girls Together, and it's why I've been love doing that show.
As a director, is it challenging when you are directing the like creator of the series, the writer, and someone who directs themselves episodes of the show?
Yeah, the thing about Lena is she's so confident in herself that she knows ultimately that she is final cut of the show, so that it gives her a freedom to allow the directors who work for her, me and Jesse Peretz and Jamie Babbitt, people who've directed over the 6 seasons, she allows us to go on and do what we want to do, knowing that she could always pull back. No, you know, she doesn't correct shots. She doesn't say, hey, I don't think the camera should be there. She sort of trusts us to be in still telling this type of story she wants to tell. But she also knows that if she doesn't like something, she won't use it. I mean, normally, you know, showrunners might recut episodes and doing this. She tends to like allow the director's cut to end up on air. I mean, she makes little changes, certain little changes, but they're so minute you can barely notice them. But she has a lot of faith in it, and she also has a partner in Jenny who's on set making sure that we don't muck up, and a bunch of writers, and Judd Apatow in LA who's not afraid to call up if he doesn't like something. So it's not like it's completely unsupervised, but there is this level because Lena has the confidence in herself. And, you know, the question's more pertinent to the first season when I went on that show, because the first time I directed on that show, season 1, episode 4, was the first time someone had directed something Lena had written ever that wasn't Lena. So that was very intimidating, because Lena had such a huge style in the pilot. It was so clearly, brilliantly directed that here we were coming in, me and then Jesse and all the other directors coming in, and we're like, what do we do? Because she's a great director and we don't want to muck up her style, and it's so clear, but yet we want to put ourselves into it. So those first few days, I remember on the very first day of Girls, I did a dolly shot, and there was a huge discussion at Video Village because they'd never done a dolly shot, and they were like, can we do a dolly shot on this show? You know, but they were like, well, I guess we can because it's episode 4. You know, maybe we haven't had a need for one before episode 4. So there was just this thing about staying in the visual language. But as the show progressed, the visual language expanded. On One Man's Trash was the first episode ever done handheld. So there was like a pushing of the envelope there. Panic in Central Park was all handheld and very verite on the streets. Like we weren't even like putting marks down on the ground. The actors were just doing it and we were capturing it. So that was a different thing for girls. And then on this American Bitch episode, that was a whole nother sort of element of storytelling in which, you know, Girls is up in the half-hour comedy category, and I think American Bitch is funny, but it's also sort of a dramedy. You know, there's a lot of drama in there too. It's its own element, it's its own animal, and a lot of cool TV is sort of goes back and forth. What is it comedy? Is it drama? What is it? And hopefully it feels like life or feels real, and life is both funny and dramatic, and that was certainly that episode, because there are, you know, when Matthew Rhys sort of turns over and he pulls his penis out, that was shot as a wide shot on purpose. I wanted the audience to not immediately see it, to look at their faces and then see Hannah's face and then wonder why is she having that face, and then look down and see the penis. And so that was done for both dramatic and comedic effect. And right after that, it gets funny in the terms of the way Hannah reacts. But is it funny? Because it's not, because it's horrific, but it's also sort of funny. So that is a challenge as a director. You're trying to make sure that you're keeping the tone right, and it's hard. You know, it's not so easy.
Yeah, it's sort of like for that moment for the audience and Hannah, it takes, because the way it's done, a couple of seconds to realize what's happening.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I wanted that. I wanted, like, is that what? Holy shit, like that. Yeah. I wanted that thought process. And you know, and I think Hannah's reaction was something we talked about. I think in an earlier draft, she didn't touch it. She didn't touch his penis. And there was a lot of discussion. A number of the writers were like, you need to touch the penis. And I was very strongly about that. I wanted her to touch it just for a moment, because it was the point of his power move, which is that this is what is expected of you. And I have that power over you as a man. It is expected of you. And so she does it for a moment, and then she catches herself. But all of that has to be we're making a half hour, you know, so it can't overwhelm and cloud us with this heavy cloud. It's got to still have a lightness of touch. And that was one of the great things about rehearsal process, was able to talk about that with the actors, and then to see the way Matthew did it and the sort of shit-eating grin that Matthew has after it happens is so great. And that was all him, and it was in the rehearsal, and I literally took a photo of it in the rehearsal. I'm like, you have to do this when we film it. Do not forget it. I took a photo of it. So fucking funny. And like, to just balance that is, you know, part of the challenge of it.
And it, like, I think like it was so interesting, because like, as it's like Hannah's touching, and she's sort of like, oh wait, this is happening. So like, she goes in with this very strong opinion as to who she thinks this guy is, and then when he's sort of affirming that, like, because of their conversation and stuff, she's actually going, oh no, he is who I thought he was. Like, he is, like, she almost like didn't, like, when she was writing it, didn't, like, I don't know how much she believed it or how much she went, but like, definitely there she's going, no, I don't need to feel bad about what I wrote at all. It's who he is.
Right, but at the same time, there's a moment where she's convinced somewhat otherwise. You know, she's charmed by him enough, you know, and he's got enough of a point that in a way he erases these black and white issues, which of course puts her in the most vulnerable position, and is exactly proving his point. He proves his point.
Yeah.
She willingly went into his bedroom. She willingly got on his bed. She willingly touched his penis. His point was proved, and it's a power thing. And it's interesting. It's really, you know, it's not an everyday sort of topic to be handled in the way that Lena wanted to handle it.
Yeah. And we've got, like, it's interesting. The standalone episodes are probably some of the most polarizing episodes of Girls. Are they the ones you're most proud of the ones you've directed?
Yes. I mean, because they've been the most challenging. I mean, I love that people had a reaction to One Man's Trash, whether it was a good reaction or a bad reaction. It was interesting. it pushed the boundaries. It was it put front and center sexism in some crazy ass way about a guy who looks like Patrick Wilson would never be with a girl who looks like Hannah Horvath, and it was so ridiculous. And as a man at that time, recently divorced, when I made that episode, I'm like, I totally get if a 25-year-old girl, bubbly girl, showed up in my door in my after getting separated, I would be totally open to that situation. So I was able to take Patrick Wilson's point of view in that episode, and I was interested in that debate and those discussions. And then with the Panic in Central Park one with Allison Williams, Allison's character is a very divisive character, but I saw it as a crazy New York romance. I wanted to capture that energy of sort of a great date night. What is that like? Because those nights you feel like you can do anything, and that's what I wanted to capture. And I'm okay if it pushes people a little bit because it was a safe environment. If Lena and Jenny are psyched about what you're doing, that's kind of all the validation you need. It's their show. It's when they're not psyched that you have to be worried about. And Lena knows that certain things are going to get a reaction. She's very savvy about things. So, I don't think she wrote American Bitch to get a reaction, but there's no way that she wouldn't have expected a reaction also.
And lastly on Girls, it just wrapped about a week ago now. What do you think Girls, the legacy of Girls will be?
Well, listen, I feel like at its heart, it was always very honest. It was very funny, and it was very honest, and it caught a moment in New York very, very accurately, and I feel like the legacy beyond the fact that it introduced the world to Lena, who will continue to be a creative force for a very long time, beyond that, which obviously is the headline, I think it caught an energy and the attention of people. Not a lot of people, not tons of people watched that show, but the people who did watch the show felt like connected to it in a way that great TV does. And being a director on a show that is in the center of some sort of zeitgeisty thing where there's an article in the New York Times every 2 seconds about the show is very interesting and very exciting. And to see Lena just grow and grow and grow as an artist and to basically have a front-row seat of that and to be her collaborator. I mean, I'll tell you, people ask about what will I miss most about Girls, and I'll tell you I will miss the summer when I get sent a script that says by Lena Dunham and I get to direct it. That's a pretty awesome, rarefied world, and I've been super lucky in that. I've gotten to do a lot of them, and they've turned out to be, in my mind, some of the best work I've done.
Finally, just to wrap up our chat, Richard, if we go back in time a little bit, because we're a website that covers the Emmy Awards, amongst other awards at Gold Derby, and you for the Ugly Betty pilot, you won the Emmy Award for Best Director in a Comedy Series. What was it like to win that? And if you want to just take us back to that time.
I think about it because first of all, it was amazing. Ugly Betty was an incredible experience, and there's not 1 second when I was doing that pilot that I ever thought we would get an award for anything. The network itself was very down on the pilot. We were kind of operating on our own little world. The head of the network at the time didn't like it. We were sort of like underdogs on every level. We were Ugly Betty. So the last thing we were thinking about was winning any awards whatsoever. So I must say, and the morning that I got nominated for an Emmy Award, no one called me. I had no idea. It was like 2.5 hours after I got nominated that the phone rang. And someone's like, you must be celebrating. And I'm like, what? Like, I literally had no idea. It's insane. So, but I'll tell you, when I won the Emmy, I gave a speech, and you don't even know what you're saying because you have 30 seconds and there's millions of people and you're terrified. But I regret deeply not giving the speech that I had planned to give, which was, I find it odd to win an award for television when 2 years before, Time Warner Cable turned off my TV because I couldn't afford to pay my TV bill. And I really regret not saying that, because it's indicative of my entire up and down strange career, and how the business turns on a dime. That you literally can be in a situation where you're a little bit in movie or TV jail and not getting any work, and you are in financial stress, and then a few things turn your way, and the next thing you're doing is a pilot that no one has faith in, and yet you do it and it turns into like Ugly Betty, and suddenly your career is turned around and you're winning Emmy Awards and DGA Awards and all that fun stuff. And it's shocking to know the other side of it. And for me, I always think about that, because it's like, never take anything for granted. You know, I've been working and lucky, and I love to work, and I do all sorts of different things. I do movies, I do documentaries, I do TV, and I love doing it all, but I don't take any of it for granted. So it's funny, because I think about that all the time. Like, it was one of those magical moments, and boy, I'd love to have another one, you know, because in a way you don't enjoy it the first time because your brain is blown by the entire process. But at the same time, it was deeply meaningful to me. Weirdly, it's like I have this thing on my, you know, on a shelf that is, you know, complimenting work that I did. It's cool.
And it was 6 nominees that year. You had the Scrubs musical. You had Office.
I thought I was going to lose to Entourage. I thought I was totally losing to Entourage, because that was a great episode that was nominated. And I'm like, well, that was difficult, that episode. I remember thinking that episode should win. So it was but you know, it is very nice to be singled out in some sort of way for a job that you love to do. And that's sort of how I approach all of this, is like, you know, it's amazing. And when Girls has been nominated, when I haven't, but when Girls has been nominated, I'm always like, this is amazing, this is great. But, you know, it's the sort of cream cherry on the top of already delicious ice cream sundae, you know? So you hope that it would be lovely, but really it's about, you know, I know that in the, you know, the Vulture on New York Magazine just did their top, they numbered their favorite episodes of Girls, and, you know, 3 of mine were in the top 4. And that's awesome. To me, that's like, wow, all right, I can show that to my mother.
Yeah. Well, there we go, Richard. From having your cable cut off to winning an Emmy to directing some of the most talked about episodes of this incredibly critically acclaimed series, Girls. You've had quite a run, and all the best of you this year for the Emmys and with what's next for you. Thanks for chatting with us today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. All right, I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.